Good afternoon, welcome to the Midday Mull for Monday the 7th of September. Continuing to reflect on the book of Ruth, and we saw how Boaz had agreed to marry Ruth, but said there was another kinsman closer in line who had a prior claim, and they'd wait for him. He'd gone to the man at the city gate, and in front of the elders had said, "Are you going to redeem not only the property but the family?" And the man had said, "No, I can't do that, you do it." And so Boaz, in front of everybody, said to them, "I am now going to take over the property that used to belong to Elimelech, that is now Naomi's property, and together with that I will take Ruth as my wife." Reading from verse 11 of chapter 4, "Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah.'" And as I reflected on the blessings that the people were speaking of, all the people that they mentioned came in unhappy circumstances. If you read back in Genesis, Rachel and Leah were married to Jacob, and Jacob loved Rachel, the wife of his dreams, and his father-in-law tricked him into marrying Leah as well. But then Rachel had no children, and Leah had children, and there was tension between them, and it was a very unhappy situation. And it ended up that some of Leah's children sold Rachel's oldest, Joseph, into slavery. And it was a complicated and messy family situation. Yet centuries later, people look back and see how Rachel and Leah, despite that complexity, had built up Judah. Likewise, Tamar had been married to Judah's son who had died young before they had any children, and she'd then been married to Onan, the second son, who'd also died. And then Judah had reneged on his duty until eventually Tamar tricked him into having a son with her. And the whole situation was completely messy, and you can sort of go and read it in Genesis, and it's a difficult and complex and messy situation. And yet here, centuries later, people look back and see God was working and used that to be a blessing. And that's an encouragement that in the midst of our messy lives, which are not always perfect, which we do not always get things right, which are so often complicated in all sorts of ways, and that in the moment one can see clearly the fractures and the splits and the tensions and the problems that there are. And yet hopefully with time, as one looks back, you'll see the blessing in those times and those spaces. And so I pray that no matter where you are and what your life is like, that you would know God working in you despite the situations. And if they're not ideal, God can still work in those situations. And that's what this little passage tells us. And I pray that as all of those people were blessed by God, that you will be too.